I'm Mario Martinez Jr., CEO and founder of Ingresso, and we are the creators of FlyMessage.io, the free personal writing assistant and text expander application. On each episode of this podcast, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you grow your sales numbers at scale. So, get your pen and paper or iPad and keyboard and start taking notes as you're now listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Modern Selling Podcast. And I am pumped. Yes, today I've got my boy, Mr. Ryan Staley here, founder and CEO of Whale Boss. And we're going to be talking about some really cool stuff, ChatGPT, AI in sales, and also biggest mistakes that SaaS CEOs make when trying to expand. Guess what? I'm in that category, living and breathing it right now. So, Ryan, my man, welcome to the show.
What's up? Happy to be on. Love the enthusiasm.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited. I obviously introduced you, Ryan Staley, founder and CEO of Whale Boss, but do me a favor, talk a little bit about yourself specifically and what is Whale Boss? And then I've got a very special question I want to ask you.
All right. No problem. Yeah. So I'll give you the super high overview because I hate it when people, my show, the Scale Up Show, talk for like 10 minutes on their intro, right? Because it's not the meat of it. But super quick background. I've had every essential basically sales position you can imagine, all the way from like door to door to inside sales, selling to investments in banks and brokerages, CTOs, and like a boiler room type environment, complex enterprise. And then basically I made it up to VP and partner, where I grew a business unit from 0 to 30 million in ARR in 5.5 years with 4 salespeople and no marketing. So did some really unique things to make that happen. And so right now what I'm doing at Whale Boss is I'm helping companies execute and implement those principles so they could asymmetrically grow without being attached to a massive burn in headcount or people or massive budgets. And so primary ways to do that are either through referral-led growth, which is one of the best possible ways where you could clone and multiply your biggest customers. And then on the back end, more the enterprise sales go-to-market motion. So those are kind of the 2 key areas. I've taught in over 800 basically CROs, VPs of sales, my methodologies on enterprise sales through Pavilion when I was an instructor, and then just got invited to be an ambassador for Gartner for their community. So I'm starting that. And then on top of it too, I've been obsessed with AI since the founder introduced me to it in Staley. This was back in November of last year. So been writing a lot on that, finding use cases where you can do 20 minutes of work and 8 hours of work in 20 minutes. So that's pretty much everything on me right now, man. Just keeping it current.
Okay. I like those productivity gains. 8 hours of work in 20 minutes. I'm sold on that. I recently saw that there was a ChatGPT prompt that you could do for writing out a marketing business plan. And I thought, all right, I wonder how legit that would be in terms of like data and information. So I haven't done it yet, but I'm very curious to see what the output would look like.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things like that. And it's just like, it's so funny because most people are just like, if they're like, hey, because like I'm building a product, an AI product right now. And one of the most common questions are like, well, why can't you just do that in ChatGPT? And that's the most common question. But like a lot of times that tells like how little people know about it, right? Because yeah, anybody on the street can just go up and ask ChatGPT this, but if they don't have the domain expertise and ask the right question, stack the right way, and then iterate off it, you're going to get garbage outputs. So at least that's what I've seen. And I think there's a big gap in understanding the market with that right now.
Absolutely. No doubt. Well, special question for you. And that is my audience wants to get to know you personally. So do me a favor, tell us something nobody knows about you, even if they're looking at any or all of your social profiles.
Yeah. So I haven't put this on any social profiles, which is a great question. So I was in the world finals for fantasy football and competed for $3 million on that against, I think it was like 180 other people. Spoiler alert, I did not win the $3 million or the second place or third place prize, which was $2 million and $1 million, which is insane. but it was super cool because I got to catch passes from two Hall of Fame quarterbacks, Joe Montana and Dan Marino, and just the experience was amazing. So that's something that really isn't on any of my social profiles.
Hey, that's pretty cool. I didn't even know that they had such a competition like that.
Yeah, it's like a FanDuel contest where basically you had to qualify. So I beat out 87,000 other people, got into that, and then had that competition for the world finals. So it was a blast, man. It was a total amazing experience.
Well, that's pretty cool. All right. Well, everybody keeps asking me, all my friends, my buddies, be like, "Hey, let's do fantasy football. You want to join?" I'm like, "Listen, I don't even have the time to think about it." Right? The 13-year-old and a 9-year-old coaching basketball. I actually did it for 6 months out of 12 so far, and fortunately, the season is over. Winter and spring. And so now I could actually get back to work, but between like that and work and scaling the company, I just don't have simply the time. So I don't know if where I could find that time, but one day in the future as things slow down, I hope to look at something like that.
Dude, totally get it. I mean, so this was what, this was in 2015, 2016. So I was in a different place then. I feel you because like I'm coaching my kids' teams now. I coach my daughter's basketball team and then my son's football team as well. So it's definitely a lot if you're trying to grow a business and do that on top of it. And I would tell you this is, I don't want to be a sucker. I don't do it as much at all, even compared to what I looked into it. And I actually did not make the playoffs in my fantasy football league with my friends for the first time in I think like 15 years. But like because of what you're saying, man, I didn't have a lot of time to pay attention to it. So I
That's
get you.
right. Priorities, right? Priorities. You
Yeah.
only have them once. You only have them young once.
Right.
And
Exactly.
unfortunately, I wish I could bottle them up sometimes at certain ages and be like, don't change, don't move, don't grow, don't do anything.
Totally. Totally
Well,
get it.
listen, let's get into some meat. First off, you have spent a considerable amount of time really delving into AI. Chat GPT is the common name out there, essentially. Now Google Bard, right? So, but everybody's like, why don't you just put it into Chat GPT, like you said earlier? So let's talk a little bit about for sales leaders how to leverage Chat GPT and AI to increase SaaS sales. And then I want to talk about how we can use it to increase marketing growth.
Okay. Yeah, no problem, man. So, what I would say is like the biggest opportunity I see is like, if you think about it, and I looked at this more of like through an enterprise sales lens, because those are the hardest jobs in sales, in my opinion, to skill up for, as well as one of the hardest positions to get to, right? Because you have to take your lumps. You have to be an SDR in most cases, then an entry level, then a mid level, and then kind of work your way up. And so, and it's not only for enterprise sales, but if you look at it, like there's probably, I don't know, 15 different skill sets that someone needs to be good as an effective sales leader. And it's the same as a rep. And like, that's why you created your tool, right? Like Fly MSG, because like you saw that, you're like, hey, how do we make it better? Right. And so I just think there's a lot of opportunity there with that in terms of deconstructing the exact uh, things that most sales leaders and salespeople are not good at, right? That would take a long time. And sometimes it's what they're not good at, but at the same time, sometimes it's deep thinking. And I'll give you an example of one of the things that I did. So one of the things I did that created a lot of value and that was really got a lot of interest on LinkedIn was basically I broke it down all the way from like, okay, how do we structure this all through ChatGPT? A comp plan, a go-to-market, a management structure, a management process, a job description, as well as other areas, and then create all that in a really short time frame that had a high level of quality versus trying to manually do it. And that's where I think you run into, where you see the differential, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So absolutely, that makes sense in terms of looking at how to do some of those administrative tasks, like recruiting a job, job recruitment, posting, those types of things. How else are sales leaders utilizing this in sales leaders or reps, frankly, in their sales process? And how could they essentially utilize AI to be able to, as you said earlier, the example, take 8 hours worth of work and put it into 20 minutes?
Yeah, I think it's really just deconstructing like what they spend the most time on, right? And what they're not the best at. And I'll give you an example. So like well, let me ask you this because I'd be curious on your take too. You've got what, like 2,000 users, or is it way more than that on your solution right now?
On Fly Message today, we have over 10,000 registered users and 5,000 that are active
Okay, cool.
every month.
So you got like 5,000 active users, right? 10,000 total, which is amazing, man. And so you probably see it with just like the work that does in terms of like just completing um eh, messages. And I'm sure you guys have integration points in AI in your solution as well, right? To help make it easier with law docs. Am I right?
So I'm so glad you brought that up. Today, Fly Message is a text expander,
Okay.
and it also is considered a writing assistant. However, we are literally building out the capability sets that allow a user to be able to not only help them write a message within the template platform like Fly Message, but also to reply to things like emails or LinkedIn messages. And what's really cool in forthcoming, and by the way, I haven't talked about this anywhere at all. So all my listeners, you guys are getting a preview. I don't know which one it is.
Whatever. It's the same thing, man.
Same word. Okay. A preview into what's forthcoming. But we'll actually be building out the Fly Right component that will allow you to not only build thought leadership, so create your own social media posts, but also to be able to reply for comments that are in line to somebody's comments. So it'll actually read the comment and then prepare something to write back on. So really getting into what I call and what I think of the name of the game is there's AI. If I go to ChatGPT, I have to go think of doing something, say I want to find something, and think about, okay, what do I want? However, what we believe is the right solution is to actually ingrain yourself into the workflow of a knowledge worker. And in this case, it would be, as an example, today, we just released phase 1 of a 4-phase approach over the next 60 days. And that is, we have now embedded our Fly Message plugin into Gmail, Outlook, LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So if you download the free tool, the little FM logo will pop up, and along with all of the text inside of Gmail and Outlook inside the actual new message. So that's phase 1. Phase 2 is bringing in what's called variables, so we can actually read all the data that's happening on LinkedIn and allow you to be able to import that into any message. Phase 3, or by the way, phase 2 is LinkedIn or any website, by the way. Phase 3 is the AI component, and that's being designed and developed as we speak right now.
Love that, man. So you get it, dude. We're speaking the same language. And so the reason why your tool has been successful, and this is what this will lead to answer your question as well, is just because people aren't really spending a lot of time on it. You know what I mean? Like there was a study that just got released yesterday. I saw it, and there's all this rage about ChatGPT and AI. I don't know if we live in this tech bubble in this unique world, but like only, I think it was like 17% of knowledge workers are using it, or people in the business, in the workforce, are using it, right? Which is surprising because like you would think everybody's using it by now. I mean, don't you have the impression there's a lot higher than 17%?
It seems like it, like everybody's talking about it, but that's also because I think that the sector that you and I are in are a bunch of techie folks, right? And so we think about it every single day, or if it's popping up on our newsfeed because Apple's hearing about what we say or seeing the things that we're interested in. So I feels like it, but I could also see how people are like, hey, I've got this job or that job that doesn't require it.
Yeah, and so I think like there's multiple categories, right? There's the part that we're talking about right now, which is productivity, right? How to like simplify the flow of what people are doing and augment their time so they could do it on more value, I should say more monetary producing activities, right? Then you got the data component, looking at large buckets of data and then creating insights. And then you have the other thing, which I think this is valuable too, is just the ideology or ideation of like new ideas that you never thought were possible, right? And so that's the other thing, because it's basically sucking in all the information that was on the web and scraped everything up to September of 2021. And so like that's a massive skill set. And it's like, or I should say data set. And if you look at it, like, I don't know if have you used it a lot? Have you used ChatGPT a lot?
I have not. My team is fiercely using it. We are using AI writing tools like Copy.ai, Jasper, Surfer SEO AI, and Content at Scale. We're actually testing out all of these different applications. One, because we'll eventually have a competitive solution to all of those, but two, because we want to scale our individual content, and we're seeing like who writes the best content out there that for blogs, as a matter of fact, and then how do we scale our own content needs for the purposes of being able to do SEO on our website.
Love that, man. So, yeah, I think like, I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, we're talking a lot about the language models now, but like, even like, if you look at, have you like, I don't know if you've used Midjourney, but Midjourney is kind of an interesting setup. Like, I suck at graphics. Like, I'm definitely not a graphics guy. I went in there for, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes, never used it before, and figured out how to create like stunning graphics, that I would never. So like, that's what I'm saying is the value with this is like, it enables you to do things that were never possible before, either because you don't have the background and the domain expertise, or actually not functional expertise, I should say. And then B, like, I like it because it's outcome driven. Like, you could say like, these are the outcomes I want, and then it creates it as long as you're specific with it. So
Interesting. And the Midjourney was to create graphics.
yeah, so Midjourney, so there's like Midjourney, Stability Diffusion, Dolly, those are like more the graphic side of it. And then there's things like Runway ML. I don't know if you've heard of Runway at all, but Runway's got like text to video, right? So like, you could type in text and it creates a video. I was using it. They just released their generation 2 of it. It's pretty cool. But what I would say is there's some things like it has a hard time creating videos for like people and animals, but it's really good with nature. You know what I mean? So like, you can create like nature videos and things like that. Now, granted, I haven't spent a ton of time on that one, but that's just kind of the feedback that I've seen with it.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed about the AI tools that are doing artwork is that a lot of the artwork is cartoon based, I guess, or oh my God, what is the animated? What
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
it looks like, it's like the real thing, but it's not really the real thing. And so but that's what I found. And so that's probably one of the things I'm like, man, as a salesperson, if I was to look at creating visually stunning content to capture someone's attention, what I would be interested in and what I think would be really cool is if I said, hey, Ryan, directly below is a blog on, and it's our blog article talking about, I don't know, well, let's just say 21 ways to be able to use, Chat GPT for sales, right? But what would be smart is that it would pull in the actual hero image that is associated with that blog article, so that it brings it into the actual message. And that's what I've seen that hasn't quite made the connection yet, that as a salesperson, I'm still having to go search and look for information to create some visually stunning messages. Alternatively, there are these other tools, but what you need is a tool that brings it all into one place. So as an example, I don't want to turn around and go to GPT and go find something, or turn around and go use a writing tool and then have to go find the image and then turn around and copy and paste that and put that into my text expander tool, and then turn around and deploy the code, and then turn around and track that in a separate app for analytics. That's what I see as the problem, is all of these point solutions are individual solutions that don't add up to the sum total. And so now what's happened is there's all these apps that are popping up everywhere. And I, as an individual seller, now have to go figure out what I want, what I don't want, what I need, what works. And I use one for this, one for that, one for this. But the killer app would be the one that's a platform play that actually brings it all together as part of the workflow of a seller, an HR person, a recruiter. And oh, by the way, this is a shameless plug for what's happening with Fly Message. And what we're thinking and what we're doing. That's what I think is sexy.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. That totally makes sense.
Gotcha. All right. So leveraging AI for marketing growth. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's the tools that you mentioned. There's even things like, have you used keywords anywhere?
Yes,
Do you have the plugin I'm sorry, not the plugin, the Chrome extension?
I do. Yes.
So that pops up in ChatGPT. So there's tons of marketing prompts pre-built in that. That's something that most people don't know about, right?
I did not know that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the lower left-hand corner. It says templates. And so all the stuff that you're talking about on the marketing side with those writing tools, it's got a lot of those capabilities.
Okay, so currently today I go to SEMrush, and then I go to what do we use? Uber Suggest, and then I do the analytics, and then I go to I pull all these things to pull it in, and then do an analysis, and then build the outline, right?
Yeah, like if you want, yeah, like if you want to build an outline, if you wanted to create blogs, if you wanted to create SEO, like it can help with SEO. I haven't tested the SEO, but like you can create a marketing plan for the next 30 days. It could help you write a book. There's a lot of capabilities that it's pretty deep on that side of the house.
Interesting. Okay.
It's worth checking out. So I've showed people they've been really excited about it. It's pretty neat, and it's free.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've covered some cool tech stuff related to the latest trend. Not that I'm going to make this whole show about AI and Chat GPT, but let's talk about, let's transition into, I'm a SaaS CEO myself personally, and many of the listeners who are out there, or they're CEOs of their own individual companies. And we're all trying to expand into more markets, grow the revenue, expand the product portfolio, find the right customers. What are some of the biggest mistakes that SaaS CEOs make when trying to expand their customer base and their revenue?
Yeah, so I'll one of them, and it's funny because I was speaking at a SaaS executive event, mostly SaaS CEOs. There's about 700 people there in March, and I asked this question. There was like 45 people in the room. I'm like, how many people in here know what their average annual contract value is? I'm like, everybody raised their hand, right? Because everybody knows that metric. Okay, I'm like, all right, how many people in this room raise your hand? Keep your hand up if you know the top 20% of your ACV, right? Of your client base, the top 20% of your clients, what that ACV is. And only one person out of those 45 knew the answer to that question. So why that's relevant is, like, if you look at companies that have massive scale of growth, like Vista Equity is a PE, or I don't know if it's PE now or VC or whatever, a combination of everything, $80 billion fund. And basically one of the things they do is they turn $1 billion, $2 billion company, and they 3x it in 3 years, right? And these are $1 billion companies. So these aren't small companies that are easy to scale. Another point of reference is Snowflake leveraged this when they're growing, and they still do. And basically what it is like, it's really modeling out and focusing on that top 20%, and then consistently iterating on that is what you spend your time, focus, and energy on. And so I call it your perfect customer profile. Most people call it your ideal customer profile, because that's the top 20% of it. And what happens is, if you layer that on with speed, like how fast deals close, but also the top 20%, you're going to find weird outliers in there that'll enable you to massively expand your deal size without changing anything else, right? And so what Vista Equity does is, Vista Equity, once they do that analysis, they pump all their money into the acquisition channels that created that top 20%, and basically refocus the energy of the organization on that. And as a result, you're going to get asymmetrical growth. And I did that as an enterprise sales leader. And so what happened was, it doubled our deal size every year. And then on top of it, 100x our largest deal size, just by making that a practice of what we did consistently. So that was one of the biggest mistakes I see, because most SaaS CEOs think like, hey, we either got to grow, we got to spend more money on ads, we got to spend more money on people, we got to get we got to get VC money. Whereas that's like money in between the mattresses that everybody walks right by.
So look at your top 20%, identify what the very specific ICP, individual customer profile, is of that top 20%. Then I think what you're saying is go replicate and duplicate.
Yeah, replicate, refine your focus on it, right? So it's like, I'll give you an example. one customer I was working with, they had 12 different verticals they worked in, right? It was a horizontal SaaS solution, right? So it could have worked for anybody. Well, when we looked at their base, found out that 87% of their revenue and their LTV over the last 5 years was on 3 or 4 verticals. So like, why would you focus on 12 or 14 verticals the same when 87% of your revenue was coming from those 4, right? Imagine what would happen if you focused, I don't know, maybe just 80% of your focus on the 4 verticals. What do you think would happen? Right? You obviously have an asymmetrical advantage. If there's that much growth on accident, imagine what happened if you actually were intentional about it, steered your force, your resources, your sales force, your resources, everything at that. And that's where weird things happen. And you become an expert in the niche, right? Or niche, whatever you want to call it, right? So that's just something that I see continuously people walk right by. That's a really easy growth lever.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So Fly Message, as we talked about, is a product-led growth play that bleeds into a sales-led growth motion. So example, 1 CSR turns into 100 CSRs at a BPO down in South America. 1 pharmacist turns into 40 pharmacists for a digital pharmacy that onboarded themselves. So what we're looking at is how do we find that one user who loves the tool, and then they start percolating and they tell Billy, Johnny, Susie, Mary, and then we start mining that data to be able to give us valuable triggers to go out and try to move it into a sales-led growth motion. With that in mind, what I've observed is that we cover every single possible vertical that you could think of that is using a text expansion and a writing assistant. And so one of the decision points that we made when we were thinking about converting Vengresso as a sales prospecting training company into a SaaS company was, what's our target? And was I going to go after the developer community that is utilizing Fly Message? Mind you, these are Google developers as an example. And there was at least 50 of them that were from Google that are utilizing Fly Message. Would I go after that particular community? Well, one of the things I did, to your point, Ryan, is I said, okay, let's take a look at, are there any major use cases? And in fact, we found that there were major use cases. So we took all the users, we enriched all the users, and then we identified who they were, as long as we could find them on platforms like LinkedIn. And what we discovered was that roughly about 27% of the total user community was from the sales line of business. The second largest was 17% that came from customer service. Then there was HR, recruiting, and then there was a kind of an interesting, it's a horizontal really, but it's business owners and solopreneurs. And then everything trailed off from there. So lawyers, doctors, physicians, accounts payable, you name it, all that trailed off. So what we decided to do was, well, listen, we're the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to sales. Everybody knows who Vengresso is, and we were the world's largest digital sales prospecting training company. So that is going to be one of our use cases. Boom, right there. And if you added that with customer service, that equaled roughly 40+% of the entire business portfolio of users. And so then we started doing some additional marketing, saying, all right, HR makes sense, recruitment, and business owners make sense. And then all other knowledge professionals, right? Knowledge workers. So what we did was exactly, I think, what you just identified, which is don't go after the entire world. Focus in terms of where the target is at. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's refined focus, and then refined energy, refined resource allocation. But so that'd be like yours is a little different because it's product led, right? So if we're talking $200,000 annual contract values, there's more nuances to it. You get a lot deeper, I guess, is kind of what I'm saying. But it's applicable to exactly what you talked about, and you did examples of like that's definitely the direction I'm kind of talking about, if that makes sense.
Fair enough. On the sales-led growth side, when we were a sales prospecting company, one of the things that we saw was telecom companies, insurance companies, and high-tech companies needed this type of training. Now, the telecom and insurance were one of our sweetest spots because that was what we called the big old dumb sales organization. Sorry for all my insurance folks that are out there, my telecom folks. I know, I love you, but they're of the older crowd. They're our age, the 45 and older. And those of us that are the 45 and older, well, frankly, we never really grew up in the digital era of selling. So this was a new way of thinking. So we really made strong ties into the telecom and insurance verticals along with high tech, because obviously their target buyers, but regardless of the position, were on these types of platforms, video and email, as well as through LinkedIn. So it made sense. So in that regard, we really honed in on those three verticals and really centered our messaging around those three verticals. And if other people came in, which by the way, we had chemical manufacturing come in at one point, we took that deal and we sold it, but wasn't our target for going out and doing semiconductors or chemical manufacturing or those types of things. Does that make sense?
Totally, man. Totally. And yeah, exactly. So that's in line with what I'm talking about. So how did you make the jump then from a sales training company to a SaaS company?
Well, that actually wasn't, it was a big decision, monumental decision, massive, but it wasn't too hard. So a couple things happened during COVID. The first dollar to be cut during COVID was training budgets. And discretionary spending for consultants, trainers, those types of things, unfortunately, when it should have really been the last sets of budgets. However, with that in mind, because we were on the virtual side, the digital selling side, it actually helped us during COVID, but we definitely saw a down swing after as time went on. As we saw that particular trend, Fly Message grew its own set of legs. We developed Fly Message to support our training program, which was 60 different sales scripts, 27-page playbook that we'd give to sales reps. And we said, we got to put these templates into an online format so they can use wherever they go, Salesforce, LinkedIn, etc. And that's what we did. So a sales rep can now take all their templates, whether it was given to them by us, their manager, or the enablement team, and they would literally put all their messages into Fly Message, categorize them based upon whatever subcategories or categories, how they brain things, use the short codes, deploy them anywhere online. And that grew its own set of legs. And we ended up only onboarding about 400 plus users. And a year later, we had 2,000 users on the platform. And that was because Ryan told Johnny, who told Mary, who told Susie, and therein lies that at that point, only 35% was from the sales line of business. And that's what shocked me. I was like, wait a minute, only 35% was the sales line of business. How did all these people come about? And it was by word of mouth marketing, essentially, is what happened. So that's when we made the decision that we were going to pivot, change, and we were going to go after a software SaaS model, subscription license, and move away from the training, which was still to this very day. I can't tell you how many training companies have collapsed, are struggling, have laid off people, and or have been acquired, because those are some of the biggest budgets that are still being cut today.
Totally makes sense, man. Well, congrats on the journey. I mean, it sounds like you just kept iterating, and it's working out for you. It's just like kind of what you're saying though. Like if you're now mostly product led as the leader, it's a total different go to market too. If you're from sales led to that, and I know you have elements of sales led, but you probably had to redesign a lot of things to make that a reality. Is that accurate?
Still redesigning, bro. Right. So if you think about what we're doing, my mindset is 25 years of B2B sales and marketing executive leadership. So having worked inside of product-led growth now for the last couple of years, it's a different way of thinking. For example, we're looking in sales-led growth, you're looking to how how you can solve a problem that in this case, the sales leader is having for him or her to be focused on how to grow revenue. But now in product-led growth, you're thinking about the workflow of a user and how the user would use your product. But more importantly, what you care about is how you get from that one user into 100 more users. So what does the workflow look like so that the user is now referring that product out to other people, and that's where you start getting the viral marketing component of referral based, PLG led growth, right? So that has been difficult to switch because my brain naturally wants to say, I've got 100 users at BPO company ABC. I'm going to go in and go sell a sales-led growth deal, right? And it still may not be ready based upon the individual workflow of the user. And so that's what we've been focused on.
Love that, man. It's good advice. Yeah, I had I had the founder of Fathom on Fathom Video, which is now like on Zoom. It's one of the apps on the icon. His name is Richard White, and it's not his first company that he's founded. But he broke down his whole like basically the term or the principle of a K factor, which is basically what you're talking about. It's built in virality in a product so that every user automatically generates more than one additional user. And so he's like, we kept focusing on that, and we're designing the product because that was kind of like I don't want to say they're nirvana, but the most important critical point to get to, so that every one user turns in another. And anyways, long story short, that's just what you got me thinking of, man, when you brought that up.
I haven't heard of that term. Now, you said it was called the K factor?
Yeah, he's like, you want to have a K factor of over 1, which is in
Oh, got a mathematical form. I got
yeah, it's a term that more on the engineering side and technical side they use for that the virality built in the product that you just mentioned.
Yeah, it's K factor plus 1. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, well, now I have a nomenclature for it, which I didn't know.
I was the first time I heard it too, and he's like, you know what? He's like, I've never really talked about this before. So it's interesting, man, because he comes more from the technical side. So
Yeah.
I love to nerd out on stuff like that too, though.
All right. Well, that's what we're working on. So as an example, when we thought about Fly Message, I looked at all the products for all of our competitors, and I said some of them are doing a good job at ingraining themselves into a user's workflow, and what they might do. For example, quick cuts, like you could press / and it brings up your text-based stored messages that you could go and find and select. But it was never front and center. And so what I looked at is I said, well, let me look at some of the other sales tools, and I want to see how they're ingraining this tool into my workflow. And so I mirrored, as an example, Mixmax, HubSpot, Salesforce. And so we are the first now text expander and writing assistant to actually be ingrained as a plugin directly into Outlook, Gmail, LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So when you open up your messaging window on LinkedIn, you see a FM logo for Fly Message right next to your send button. When you open up Gmail, you see all of your prompts that tell you, to go find your Fly Message inside there. And so that really was a big one for us, is how do I get there? And now use that as a building block to add in your AI component and some of the other writing capability sets. And so that's what we're actually doing. We launched phase 1 literally today.
Awesome, man. Well, excited to check that out. I'm definitely gonna have to check that out.
Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about growing from 0 to 30 million in ARR. You had 4 sales reps. You did it in 5.5 years. You obviously talked about really focusing in on that top 20%. Are there other factors, other things that we should consider on how to grow a SaaS company? And if you were talking to me, by the way, our motto soon will be sales-led growth with product-led as a background, as we launch some certain business enterprise features. So if you're talking to me, guide me here on how to help me think about going through the sales-led growth motion to scale to 30 million.
Yeah, no problem, man. So it all depends, and we could do like a live simulation of this right now. So if you're talking like your team, how experienced and how big is your sales team right now?
Right now, I have shortened it, meaning I've got 1 BDR and then this founder-led sales. So nobody else.
Because you've been focused more on the product led, right? So that's kind of, so one of the things that was really interesting, I had the budget to hire 1 person, right? So when I was creating this, it wasn't like go hire 4 people instantly. And so first guy I hired actually didn't work out. But what I also had the opportunity to do is leverage folks that were already in the sales group and get them kind of what I was saying, like invest, refocus. Was because we had named accounts. We leveraged a Dream 100 methodology, and so we had named accounts. And what we did is basically had leveraged that principle for the targeting, but then had them focus 30% of their time on those opportunities, right? So did that across multiple people in the regular sales group. And the beautiful thing about it was like, that's a way to de-risk moving up market in enterprise sales, because of the fact that you could really find out, you can do a couple of things. One, it starts to get you into much bigger opportunities. Two, you start to train your folks on the fly and see who's capable of what. And then three, it enables you to, once you start getting some momentum and pipeline growth, to instead of making it 20% or 30% of what they're focusing on for those larger opportunities, we went from 30-70 to 50-50 to 70-30 to 80-20. And that's the way to do it so that you scale it up while you don't lose out on that short-term revenue. So I think that's step one if you don't really have a team, unless you have a big budget to add people, right? Which is enterprise sales folks with experience are not cheap, right? You're talking OTE 300 to 500K. And so that's a big budget. So that's what I would say is step one. In terms of like, if we're looking at pipe, like how to acquire it, something really unique, we leveraged outbound in combination with event-led growth. And so with event-led growth, what we did is we targeted the events and the niches of those verticals I mentioned with the decision makers in it, right? We didn't just do like retail or legal or healthcare. We did like retail CIO of this size company in there, right? We did healthcare CIO of medical centers plus, right? Or hospitals that were kind of all over the place. And so what would enable us to do that is we started there, but then what we did is we penetrated is kind of a bad word, but infiltrated or whatever the board of directors. And then we'd get one of the board of directors members as a client, and then proliferate that across the other board members, which pushed it down to the membership groups. So kind of like what you did with product-led growth and how it created organic expansion, this created that at an exponential scale, because you have the board members of the most well-respected organizations referring us to other organizations that were very, very well respected as well. And then it just kind of grew. That's one piece. And then, so that's more on the like acquisition side, client acquisition pipeline side. And then on the back end side, one of the things that I saw is like, and I validated this when I was in CRO school, teaching over 800 revenue leaders this. One of the things that I talked to, there was a group of like 30, and I'll ask you this question too, is like, what selling methodology do you think is the best for enterprise sales?
So I grew up on the Miller-Heiman sales methodology for blue sheets, conceptual selling, strategic selling, LAMP, large account management. I've always subscribed to it. In fact, little story, when I was 21 years old, I started out doing software sales at 19, got my big break there. When I was 21, I wrote a check for $7,000 to go attend a 5-day Miller-Heiman training course. And I've used that. And our crescendo at Vingresso was when Miller-Heiman, which is then the largest sales training company in the world, they hired for the first time in their 40-year history an outside sales training company. And that was Vingresso. So that $7,000 ticket turned into a massively large deal and a huge feather in our cap. So I prefer that conceptual selling, the blue sheet. That's what I subscribe to. But I know there's many others that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, there's Challenger, there's MedPick, and this isn't a knock to any of them. There's like really good things. There's spin selling. I mean, you name it. There's 17 different methodologies, right? And so I asked, and this was somebody who was very high up at, actually who was very high up in sales, wasn't there anymore, but in confidence, I'm like, hey, like, or actually, let me take a step back. I'm starting to jump a little bit. So first thing I did is I asked that group of 30 CROs or VPs of sales, and like, hey, what's the best selling methodology, or what's your best approach to it? And every single one of them didn't only use one, they used like 2 or 3, right? And it's because they're incomplete. And so one of the things that I did is looked at, and this is what I think the sales world gets caught into, is we're so worried about our internal processes and we're so worried about qualifying people, we forget about the emotional experience that the buyer goes through when they're buying, right? And so what I did is I leveraged the process and the execution layers, but then I created my own basically system on how to execute it. And basically that's looking at 12 different players and how to orchestrate them emotionally. I don't mean manipulate, I just mean work with them and motivate them, because emotion is what creates the action, right? And then pair that up with the logic in terms of how each individual person, as well as the enterprise, is evaluated from a KPI perspective, as well as an internal motivation. And that's kind of what I think was different about it, is most folks just went through this mechanical process without really, really looking at like managing politics, orchestrating that, connecting with people at a deep emotional level. And as a byproduct, I'll give you an example, man. 2 reps, one person highly, highly focused on the emotional component. The other was a grinder, like always hit his activity numbers, always hit his his dial, everything that you could imagine on the front end to generate pipe meetings, right? So what would happen was he had maybe 200% of the pipeline she had, but at the end of the year, she had 130% of the results while working significantly less. And that's because she really integrated that emotional part, if that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. Yes, that's that EQ, IQ type of thinking, that quotient, bringing that to the sales process and how we engage for sure.
Well, and I'm even looking at it deeper, right? Like, and this is a simple way that anybody can apply that's listening right now is like, okay, so the 2 like super simple questions, not to overcomplicate it, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible, right? So anybody could walk away and actuate this. The number one thing is like, if you're working with someone, as first, like we look at the decision funnels of companies, those are like, think about like departmental funnels, right? From like a C-level all the way down to an end user, right? If you look at that, every single role has KPIs that they're evaluated on, that either get them promoted, stay the same, or fired, right? Those are the logical components. And that feeds into their compensation, which feeds into exactly what they're doing at work. Most people don't look at it like that. That's a very easy trail. So if you could tie your solution into how a person's compensated from a KPI perspective, and into those, they're going to run through a wall for you. And it helped me actually get, well, this is one of our rep. The first big deal I got ended up being like a $200,000 a month deal. And the way that deal got to that point was because the first phase of it, the first leg of it, I found out how the VP of supply chain was compensated and what their bonus was dependent on, and integrated and created the solution so that it helped that and got him across the line before his bonus was due. Right. So that's like one example. On the emotional side, the most simple question anybody to ask works like clockwork is, if you had free time outside of work, what would you, and you weren't spending time with your family, what would you spend time on? Right.
That's a good question. I don't know.
So, and most people don't know. And they're like, if you don't say without your family, they'll be like, oh, I'll spend time with my family, my kids, I'm so busy with work. I got this, right? Because they're busy executives like you, Mario. So the other side of it though, is like, is really on the fact of like, they'll tell you what they're passionate about. Like I've had C-level executives be like, I had one guy tell me like, I like to photograph waterfalls, like unique waterfalls. And he had this whole private Instagram page with all his waterfall pictures. Took one vacation a year to Iceland and obscure places. So why I'm telling you this is because it's highly, highly relevant. And that's how you connect with a person at a deep level about something that they're emotionally passionate about. So.
Got it. Got it. All right. All right. Fair enough. Good. Well, we're coming up to a close here. We're actually going a little bit over time. It's been a good conversation, Ryan. So a couple things. First off, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way? Is it through email, LinkedIn, Twitter? You tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just reach out to me. Ryan at whalesellingsystem.com is my email address, or LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I publish every day. I'm sharing a lot about the integration of AI and sales and revenue growth in there with these different workflows that I kind of mentioned at the beginning of the episode.
And it's Ryan Staley, STALEY, is how you find him out on LinkedIn. And please, 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 you've heard me say this, I don't know, 200 and something episodes, whatever we're on now. You've heard me say it over and over again. When you reach out to Ryan, please make sure you say, Ryan, I heard you on the Modern Selling podcast, as a personalized connection request message so that he knows where you're coming in from. Ryan, I got one last question for you, and that is your all-time favorite movie. What is it?
Yeah. Oh, and one thing before I answer that is the Scale Up Show is my podcast. So if you like podcasts like this, check that out. That's a dull moment I had when you're asking, like, where can people find you? Right. Podcasters like listen to podcasts. And this is a really good question, man, because it's like, do you pick your favorite movie from like what's the funniest, what you've watched the most? And like, one of the things I probably have to go back to is, remember the movie Goonies? Like,
bro, are you going to say Goonies?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Goonies, man.
I love it. Wait, so the funniest, you are the first person in Modern Selling podcast history to to say my movie that is my all-time favorite movie is the Goonies, bro.
Dude, love that, man. It's just, it hits me because I was a kid, watched it so many times, still know all the quotes from it. Like I could say Tommy Boy like right behind me because that's amazing, but like just my kids have watched it. I'll watch it with them. It's a classic. This stood the test of time, and most movies do not do that.
Baby Ruth.
Yeah, you got Baby Ruth. You got like, that's my mom's most favorite piece. You got all sorts of, I mean, I don't know. I can go on and on, man. It's a great movie though. It's a classic.
So funny story, not story, true story, I guess. True fact, funny fact. The chunk of the Goonies. Oh my God, I forget his first name. Cohen, I think is his last name. I'd have to look up, I can't remember his first name, but I actually used to work for him when I was at UC Berkeley in the what do we call that? The student advocate office. And even funnier was when we had the football games, the whole crowd of the student population used to yell, truffle, shuffle, truffle, shuffle. And he would run down, and he wasn't ginormously large at all. He was maybe a little bit thick, but nothing beyond average. But he would pull up his shirt and he would
no way. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so
we gotta get him on the show, man. That would be cool. We could do a mix-up interview, Chunk on the show. On the other side of it, you're gonna appreciate this. Similar thing, although it's not personal. So one of the dads my son plays hockey, right? And he plays with another kid. His dad's last name is Matuzik. So Matuzik was a pro football player for the Raiders and was actually Sloth in Goonies, right? And so, yeah, it's so well. He's like, do you know my cousin was Sloth in Goonies? I'm like, come on, man. That's like the most obscure reference. He's like, yeah. So maybe we get Sloth and Chunk together and then we mix it up, the four of us or something like that, man. It would be a blast.
Jeff Cohen, that's what it was. Yeah, Jeff. Now, we connected on LinkedIn. I don't know if he remembered me, but I reached out personally and said, this is what's up. Do you remember me? And this has been, I don't know how many years since Cal. And he connected, and I tried a few times to reach out and be like, bro, I want you on the podcast. But he actually is a lawyer now, and he represents essentially actors in their negotiating contracts and those types of things. So that's what he's doing nowadays.
That's awesome, man. That's hilarious.
Anyways, what I love about it is the fact that you gave Goonies, and for me, it was my inspirational video that you can accomplish anything, right? And it was like, if you have a roadblock, go for it and run after it and pursue your dream and don't let anything stop you. And still to this day, I love that movie. Any case, but so that goes down as a historical moment. Nobody has ever said Goonies. In fact, when I was on the red carpet rollout for a movie that Salesforce produced, they had like 20 sales influencers called The Story of Sales. And we were doing a red carpet rollout back in 2019. And it was funny. One of the questions on the red carpet rollout was, hey, what's your all-time favorite movie? And I was like, you wouldn't believe this. And I was with 25 other executives, and we were all standing there. They're all, my age or older. And I was like, The Goonies. And everybody was like, what's The Goonies? And I was like, How did you not know the Goonies? So anyway, so the Goonies it is. I love it, Ryan. Thank you so much for being on the show and for all of you listening. And hey, I'm sorry I went a few minutes over, but don't turn that dial just quite yet. Listen to this very important message right now. Thanks for listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Please do me a huge favor and give the Modern Selling Podcast a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Oh, and don't forget, if you'd like to save 20 hours or more in a month and increase your productivity, go right now and download Fly Message, that's flymsg.io for free. It's your free text expander and personal writing assistant. Hey, thanks for listening in, and until the next episode, good selling.